I'm George Galloway.
I'm Steve Topple.
And together we are Topple Galloway, the merry wives of Windsor. They are not. The miserable wives of Windsor are in danger of bringing down the firm. That's what they're saying. The two wives hate each other, and they have, of course, this is all soap opera stuff. I mean, it's selling tickets. But apparently William and Harry are being torn asunder by their quarrelling wives. Now, the news drip has been, Steve, in such a way as to make you sympathise with the white one, Kate.
Yes.
It's the black one, Meghan, that's the baddie in this show. Imagine that.
Shock horror.
Now, on the face of it, it is alleged that Meghan has been talking badly to the help, to the servants. And it's briefed that that's because of her Hollywood background. She's just used to everything perfect. They said that when she went into the chapel at Windsor Castle, she found it too musty and asked if air freshener could be sprayed around.
Right.
It's probably the incense, but then she's only new to the Church of England.
Well,
the allegation is that Harry and her have had to go and live in a country cottage.
Yes.
Of course, turns out to be rather a large cottage.
Yes,
what do you say?
Well, oh goodness, we love a good royal story on this programme for some bizarre reason, Mrs. Galloway. We keep having these royal debates. I know it's all it's more Hollywood than actual Meghan Markle's career in Hollywood.
Yeah, more crossroads than Hollywood.
All you need is Harry in a little bobble hat and Benny, wouldn't you?
Benny.
Yes. Look, yes, that's. I mean, you've explained the nuts and the bolts of it rather well. That's my reading of this situation. They're going to this this ramshackle 10-bedroom palatial country cottage, aren't they, on the Queen's estate, as opposed to living in next door to William and Kate, as the rumours. But it has been pushed as bad Meghan, bad Meghan. I mean, if you read the news reports as well about, because they are apparently major developments on this story. Apparently they are all going to go to Sandringham for Christmas. They are going to spend it together now.
Yeah, although that's quite a big place. You can avoid each other. I mean, it's not, if we go to someone's house for Christmas, you've got to look at them.
If we fell out and you came to our 2 up, 2 down council house in South London,
there's no hiding
tricky.
place.
You'd be hiding in the outhouse.
Sandringham, you could maintain a froideur and sit down for dinner. Even the table will be really long. And you can do the seating plan that the two merry wives are at opposite end. But will it have any importance for the public? I mean, will this have any political implications? Will this...
My blank face gives you all the answer you need to know. Carry on. Go on.
Will this royal soap opera so develop as to endanger the firm? The Daily Mail thinks so. I mean, they're on perpetual royal watch, as you know.
Of course.
And
is Diana alive yet? Did she come back?
Well, they've had a real downer on Meghan right from the start. And it just strikes me, and you know, I've kind of been a part of it to some extent. Harry gets, I think, a bit of a raw deal. I went along with all these jokes that he looks like Major Hewitt and so on, but now I've seen pictures of the Duke of Edinburgh at his age with a beard in a naval uniform, and actually he's the double of the Duke of Edinburgh. So I withdraw all my allegations about the paternity of Prince Harry, but he has, I think, got a raw deal. The press have had a bit of a down on him for quite some time. William is by far the more, what would you say, obedient, boring. I mean, he's even lost, I was going to say he'd lost his hair, but... Where's your hat? I've got a hat sale if you want to borrow a hat.
Just last minute wardrobe malfunction meant no hat today, but I think you're onto something, moving away from my receding hair.
By the way, you look like an emperor, like a magnificent Roman emperor.
Infamy. They've all got it in for me. I think you're onto something with the Harry thing, because you're correct. There's always been this backlash in the press against him, and now you can see it, the manoeuvres being made onto Meghan, as it were. And I think we have there's this hangover in the British media from the sort of Diana kind of Fergie days, where the press pack will look for any chink in the royal armoury, any royal that doesn't quite fit in, to make the case for the monarchy in a bizarre kind of way. They'll pick off the ones that don't conform,
don't conform
to bolster Elizabeth and her underlings and bolster the actual monarchy, almost like all these imperfect royals are undermining our actual royal family. And of course they're going to do it with Meghan. They're going to hate her because, like you say, because she's a woman of colour, because she's like Kate in some respects. I mean, these people aren't working. Common. Yeah, these people aren't working.
She is common. I mean, Kate isn't actually common.
No, she's not. Dad's a millionaire.
Dad's a multi-millionaire, but Meghan's definitely common.
Yeah,
she's down there with us,
isn't she?
She's down there with us, I would say.
Yes.
Maybe
come
not.
Come round to my council house, Meghan, whenever you want. And
Maybe not
sure
quite.
You'll fit right in on my estate.
Maybe not quite. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is this. They always look for members of the royal family to undermine, and this just continued from. Well, it's Princess Margaret was the ultimate one, wasn't it? They didn't like.
Why does it matter? Your blank face.
But I know why it matters. I do.
It's about to matter in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Because the parliamentary logjam is such that the Queen is actually going to have a decisive.
She is. She's going to be a bit busy, probably.
Yeah, on who's governing this country.
Indeed.
She might give it to Jeremy Corbyn by Christmas, according to Sky News, or she might, as she's done in the past, in Australia, for example, when she effectively brought down the Labour government there 30, 40 years ago, she may act in such a way as to stop Jeremy Corbyn becoming Prime Minister.
Indeed. Just segueing off, actually, as you brought this up, but we haven't discussed this off camera, but I've been following what's going on with Labour, because obviously we have the situation with the possible contempt of Parliament, of the government.
As we speak.
As we speak. Yeah. We're recording this on Tuesday, and this debate is actually going on while we're recording. Contempt of Parliament because they wouldn't release the Attorney General's legal documents surrounding the withdrawal deal that's been reached. So this is ongoing. By the time this goes out, this may have been, we'll know whether it's going to go to the
Standards and Privileges
Committee or whether it's going to be dead in the water. But also what you have rumbling is, of course, the Squawk Box, my mate over there, Steve, reported that Labour are planning to table a no confidence motion on the 11th of December after the planned Brexit debate. Now, this is fascinating because Labour, you can see what Labour are doing. They're trying to sort of manoeuvre the government into a completely untenable position, not least by the contempt debates that they're holding, and then hitting them with a possible no confidence motion. Summing up briefly, how do you what are Labour up to, and how do you think this is going to pan out?
I think they're handling it masterfully. They're following the Napoleonic code of never interfering with your enemy whilst they're busy making a mistake. But now we've come to the point where they have to try and cash in on the series of mistakes. And the contempt motion is the left hook, and the motion of no confidence is the right hook. And there is a possibility that they can knock the government out, certainly knock the Prime Minister out. I don't see her being the Prime Minister by Christmas. Doesn't mean the Tories will be out. They've got 14 days to find another leader who can command a majority in the House. But in that 14 days, Jeremy Corbyn could press his claim on the palace and say, well, why wait for them? I can command a majority right now, or at least a minority government that could get the country out of this jam. Here's my prediction, exclusive to Topple Galloway. There'll be a general election in Britain on Thursday, the 31st of January, because that gives a Tory leader, new Tory leader, enough time to get up ahead of steam and say, Labour are trying to stop Brexit, we're trying to deliver it, but we need a proper parliamentary majority to do so, and to do so in time before we actually are due to crash out or otherwise of the EU on the 29th of March. Now, I remember vividly, before you were born, the February 1974 general election. The snow was on the streets and the hills. Harold Wilson won a very hair's breadth majority in Parliament. And I've got a feeling Jeremy Corbyn's going to do the same. January 31st, put it in your diary, in pencil at least.
And Queenie, put it in your diary and tell Kate and Meghan to sort it out. You're going to be a bit busy.
Sort that out, Meghan! Fog in the Channel, continent cut off. That's a bit what I feel like looking at the news from Europe.
Yes.
As we can now say, now that we're no longer, or are we, a part of it. No, seriously, the French are revolting. The Spanish, at least in Andalusia, in the south of the country, have made a really distinctive swing to the right. Political developments on the continent, as we used to say, are warming up. And in fact, everywhere there's political instability. The more you look at it, there's actually not that many places in the so-called democratic world that are stable enough to actually do anything about making progress. They're all actually treading water. There's little Macron, who was France's Tony Blair. It's not so long ago. Alistair Campbell and others. Gary Lineker, the English footballer, said, that Macron looks great. Can we have one? Macron will be lucky. He'll be lucky to see Christmas. In fact, the French have a way of dealing with their leaders when they displease them.
Yes.
The French events, let's take them first. The proximate cause is the petrol duty, fuel duty. But as Macmillan once said, it's not one damn thing, it's one damn thing after another. So now everybody's joined in. The firefighters, the ambulance drivers, even the police.
Just taking their helmets off, haven't they?
The police that he's depending on to crack the heads of the demonstrators are taking their helmets off and standing alongside the demonstrators. The French know how to do it, don't they?
Well, they do, yes. I mean, this is what strikes me about this whole yellow jersey, yellow vests protest movement is two things. Firstly, that it is a wonderful example of, as you say, how the French do protest and express their dissatisfaction so well, because it's not particularly party political. It's left and right. It's left, it's right, it's far left, it's far right, it's some centrists thrown in for good mix, it's the anarchists getting involved. It's across the political spectrum. That is what I've always thought, that France really could teach us a lesson or two over here. We go out with our little placards and have a jolly nice day out and take our sandwiches.
Make tea, not war.
Yes, and wonder why nothing changes. And the French are very good at this. But they're very good to an extent with this, because the other point with this, for me, and I talked about this on my podcast, and I talked about it on something else I filmed.
How's your podcast going, by the way?
Yeah, it's good. Yeah,
it's really good. Really good. You're getting good numbers.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's going well.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. It's going really well, as the bags under my eyes show. It's quite a mammoth task editing it, actually. But what strikes me with these protests is really, as well, and I kind of sum it up in one line, you voted for a centrist banker, what did you expect?
Yeah, but Steve, what choice did they have? The choice was between the National Front, Le Pen, and Macron. This was the great tragedy, because Mélenchon, who is the best president by far, if he'd got 2% more in the first ballot, just 2%, the choice would have been between him and Macron. And he would certainly have won. But even you would have voted for Macron rather than Marine Le Pen, no?
No, I would have spoiled my ballot, as I do over here, George.
How naive of me.
No, I know, but it's...
But they did, they elected him, but they never loved him.
No.
The idea that France was just waiting for a little version of Tony Blair, a little banker's ramper to be in the Elysee, it's a bit unfair to them, because it's the way the cookie crumbled. The Labour candidate, if he'd pulled out, which he should have done, he only got 6%, whereas Mélenchon got nearly 20%. If he'd pulled out, enough of his voters would have put Mélenchon into the second ballot. Now, Mélenchon's got a program. He's presidential. He's not a moral and political dwarf like Macron, and he could have been actually a real leader in Europe. Yeah. And if Corbyn was able to get in England, my goodness, we could have a reunion of Britain
Indeed.
and France.
I mean, the bigger aspect to the whole protests that are going on in France is, of course, with regards to the EU, because Macron has definitively, since he came to power, tried to position himself as the saviour of the EU.
Mr. EU,
Mr. EU, yes, very apt way of putting it. And he's really made manoeuvres to try and move the control of Europe from sort of Germany, as it were, over to himself. And the fact he can't control his own domestic situation now, because I mean, again at the time of recording, the latest news was that he's conceded that he's putting off the diesel tax rise
6 months,
for 6 months, which has pleased no one.
No,
Le Pen has come out against it. The left have come out against it.
I think it's a bit like Louis the whatever he was in the French Revolution. If you leave your concessions too late and make them too little, you end up, literally in his case, under the guillotine. Because the art of making a climb down is timing. And I think having battered thousands of people's heads over the last 2 weekends, they're not going to sit at home this weekend because he took tuppence off the petrol price.
Indeed.
And only for 6 months. So, but it's quite funny. Who are the three people who, over the last couple of years, have tried to rule the world? The British government, the French government, and the American government. And none of them can rule their own countries.
Exactly.
Trump might be going to jail. Theresa May might be going to the, I don't know, the Arboretum, to the Tower, yes. And Macron might be going to Madame Guillotine. Yet they're trying to run other people's countries. They're trying to run Russia. They're trying to run the Ukraine. They're trying to run the Middle East.
Start on Ukraine, good grief.
They're interfering everywhere, and not one of them is worth the famous picture of warm spit.
No, they're not. But then, meanwhile, sort of juxtaposing what's happening in France, Spain is the next topic of our conversation, isn't it? And in Andalusia, the far-right Vox party in the regional elections managed to win 12 seats, didn't they? Which is, by all reports, if they're to be believed, is the first time since 1973 when
that there have been fascists in a regional parliament. That's true, but you don't have to look hard in the south of Spain to see the reason. And you see the same reason as in Italy, that populism, partly right-wing populism, partly left-wing populism, is on the rise, because Andalusia is beached. It's beached in terms of the economy, in terms of austerity, but also beached literally taking the exodus from Africa. That's where all the poor, huddled masses of the African continent are arriving. And nobody helps them handle that. Nobody says, tell you what, we'll take a couple of hundred in Bergen in Norway, we'll take 500 in Inverness in Scotland. No, they just leave them. And they leave the Spanish people, who are already under the hammer, economically speaking, to just live with this tidal wave of misery that's arriving from Africa as a result of the neoliberal economic system. I was talking about this in Bergen, in Norway, at the weekend, that the poor world is being driven onto the roads and onto the seas by the economic depredations of the globalized capitalist system. War, impoverishment, super exploitation, environmental degradation has got the world on the move. And the world turns its back away and leaves them to be handled by the people amongst whom they landed in the first instance. So Vox came along and said, no more. Just like Salvini in Italy said. Why should we take all the refugees? It was you that started all the wars. It was you that bombed the countries of these people. Why should you leave the residue to us.
Yeah. And the challenge is, I mean, wonderful summing up of the situation, because essentially all our pigeons are coming home to roost for us now. You see it with the caravan, you see it, as you say, with North Africa and Middle East, literally coming home to roost. And the challenge is, two challenges the way I see it. Firstly, it is showing the inherent failings of the EU and the fact that it is starting to fall apart, which makes Brexit very interesting as well, because with the deal that Theresa May's struck so far, if there are any manoeuvres to be made, are the sort of perpetual chaos that we're now seeing in Europe and European countries, is the EU going to make some more concessions to Theresa May just to try and keep us on side, as it were? Because, I mean, the EU is literally falling apart within itself. So it highlights...
And yet its supporters here are forever telling us that they are
wonderful it is.
Yeah, they are the guarantors of our stability, and not just our stability, but civilization itself.
Yeah.
In fact, in Europe, on the mainland, right-wing parties, far right-wing parties, racism, xenophobia is everywhere.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, you look at... I was watching Crosstalk on RT. Very good programme, and they were talking about...
Oh, it's a great programme,
Me and Nicola were watching it, and they were talking about Ukraine. It was on the other night, and they were saying that the Ukraine, the situation there, and Poroshenko, and this martial law, and blah, 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 how it's being sold to us as something new. And I was sat there and going, but Poroshenko banned the Communist Party in 2015. This whole notion...
And banned the Russian language.
And that as well, and how this notion is somehow new. And yet this is the EU project, and it's summed up in Ukraine, it's summed up in the rise of the far right in Spain and Italy and Poland, and yet Hungary, and this is something that we still want to be part of. So it's more headaches for the EU. But what's also interesting with the Spanish situation is it's the challenge that's now presenting itself for the more democratic socialist and socialist left, because by calculations, if this sort of transcribes into a proper election, as it were, then the Socialist Party in Spain, if the two sort of centrist right parties got together and got together with this Vox party, then that could oust the socialists regionally, the control of power in Andalusia, couldn't it?
And there's a national election coming up next year.
Exactly. And it seems that across the whole of Europe, and somewhat ironically, the only place where the sort of what is now the centrist left, this kind of democratic socialist left, the only country where it seems to be getting it right, it's Corbyn.
It's
because it's failing
remarkable.
Across Europe. The only party across Europe, the only party on the left that's responding appropriately seems to be the Green Party across Europe, which is
although not here in Britain. They are effectively now the talking head for Goldman Sachs and the rest of them. I mean, the only time I hear from the leader of the Green Party, Caroline Lucas, or co-leader,
former co-leader,
is when when she's talking up for Remain in the EU and cheating the referendum result and so on. I tell you the one thing I fear, and it harks back to our last discussion, and I communicated this to people close to Corbyn, as they say, this very morning. What Theresa May or the Tories need, Boris Johnson maybe, they need a general election in which Labour is the party trying to stop Brexit. And they are the party trying to deliver Brexit. Especially as the only thing that Theresa May achieved in her negotiation, even though it's open to doubt and interpretation, but the only thing she can claim that she got out of the negotiation is an end to the free movement of Labour. So it's not a Norway option in that sense, because you've still got free movement into Norway. It's Norway plus, if her version of it is to be believed. So the Tories fight a general election and they say, our version of Brexit means no more free movement of Labour. Labour, in the Labour Party, is trying to stop that Brexit. On that dichotomy, the Tories win the election. And Labour must at all costs avoid the next general election being about pro and anti-Brexit. Labour must go into the election supporting the decision to leave the European Union and arguing only about the terms.
Yeah.
If it allows itself to be pushed into a position, and I say pushed, I mean internally pushed, by Starmer, QC and the rest, then the Tories could well defeat them in that general election. It's all very interesting over the Channel in Europe.
And it could get even more interesting here.
When I grew up, we used to talk about on the continent, like we weren't a part of it.
Yeah.
Soon we won't, maybe.
Fake news is all around us at the moment, isn't it, George? I know. Da, da, da. Yes, check under your bed for the latest fake news. But yes, we're surrounded by fake news, and it's been all over the press this week, but not the press that you might be reading. Because the purveyors of fake news, the finest free-range, organic fake news you can get in this country, has been The Guardian.
You get muesli with it.
You do, yes, muesli and yes, all sorts
muesli and fake news.
Yes. So The Guardian have been ripped apart for this story over Donald Trump advisor Manafort visiting Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy.
3 times.
3 times, apparently. It was 2013, 15 and 18, apparently, he visited. But WikiLeaks have denied it. The Ecuadorian consulate, diplomat, whatever, have denied it as well. And WikiLeaks has threatened to sue The Guardian for this piece of fake news. Now, The Guardian claimed that they changed their article quickly afterwards, saying sources told us.
Yeah, that doesn't protect them, of course. That's no defense. If I run a story saying sources say that Steve Topple was drunk coming into Topple Galloway this week, if that is untrue and damaging, which it is, it's just as defamatory as if they claimed it themselves. It is a new low for The Guardian, though, and full marks to the Canary for its role in outing all this, because it's not just that on yesterday's fish and chip paper, The Guardian said something that was entirely bogus. It was a complete fabrication. In that sense, a forgery. It's not just that. It's that evening, every network in the United States led its news bulletins all night with that. Paul Manafort met Julian Assange in the Ecuador embassy in London 3 times, including when he was the brief chairman of Donald Trump's election committee. And therefore, Assange, Russia, Trump are all caught in a web of collusion, which is, of course, what Mueller and the inquiry and Russiagate is all about. If it were true, it could be QED, it could be a eureka moment, except it's completely invented. And The Guardian have not even had the grace to remove it from their website, still less to apologize for it. They've edited it, as you say, rode back, but it's still there. And they still have not acknowledged that it's a fabrication. And for me, I don't see how the editor of The Guardian, a former friend of mine, Catherine Viner, I don't see how she can survive that, because you cannot turn a great journalistic institution of more than 100 years standing into basically the Forger's Gazette and continue to hold your head up in polite society. It's yet another stab in the back for Julian Assange, yes, but it's a stab in the back to the Guardian's traditions as a once fine English newspaper. And you got to wonder if it's tied to this other piece of fake news, the Integrity Initiative, the NATO PSYOPs war, which has been covertly funded by Western governments, including our own, £2 million this year, by the way, donated by our taxes to a company registered as a charity at an office in a derelict mill in rural Fife in Scotland, which is currently being demolished.
Yeah, I had
all of that is true, I promise.
No, yeah, it is. I had exclusive access. I won't say where. I had access to the funding form that you can fill out for the Integrity Initiative. I saw a copy of it today.
Wow!
It's 3 columns. It's brilliant. It's 3 columns on a bit of paper saying,
"Are you prepared to lie? Lie big time." Lie whoppers.
I wish it was. No, but it's literally, what do you want the money for? When are you going to spend it? And something else. And this literally is all it is. But I think you're right. Is it linked to Integrity Initiative? Possibly, I don't know. You see, for me...
It's not the same stable.
Yeah, of course. But I think what's more interesting with the story is it encapsulates the demise of The Guardian since it was raided for the Edward Snowden files in 2011, I think it was, wasn't it? Because it seems ever since that happened, The Guardian has just buckled and gone downhill. I think that was the final sort of nail in its coffin, was that happening. And while it was never perfect before, there's always been a bit of it in recent history, it just seems to have collapsed. And because, I mean, specifically as well, the collapse of The Guardian's integrity, ironically
integrity
enough.
We're full of integrity.
The collapse of its integrity has been cited repeatedly in the Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Index. It's every year it says, and The Guardian, because of blah, 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 has made the UK's press integrity completely collapse. And I don't think there's anywhere, as you say, left for Kath Viner to turn. I don't think there's anywhere left for The Guardian to turn. Its reputation's just shattered
in tatters,
bits. And
it really is.
And it's kind of sad, because however much I write columns slagging off The Guardian and moan about it, you don't want to see decent journalists, which some of them are, and an actual newspaper go this way. But it's just whether it's be a case of they were intentionally pushed to run this story or whether it was just sloppy journalistic standards remains to be seen. But it is damning for it, and I can't. And
well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a charitable explanation. Buckled, going down, hoodwinked. I think these are all quite charitable. Actually, I personally believe that The Guardian. This is why I link it. The Guardian, The Times, the BBC, Sky News, all of them are part of a network. All of them are pointing in the same direction. They are all owned by different people, but they all have turned their guns in the same direction. And that is against Russia and against anyone internally, the enemy within, who are seen to be weakening the neoliberal austerity type politics that the British state currently represents. And I think they are knaves rather than fools. I knew Catherine Viner well, and very close friends of mine knew her much better than that. And none of us can understand, and she certainly never tried to explain how it is that she, who we knew and knew so well, has become this pitiful standard bearer for a moth-eaten and sinking newspaper like The Guardian. Sorry, Kath Viner, it's time for you to go.
Indeed.
Now that we're on YouTube, free on a Sunday.
Oh, yes.
We've got huge, the audience leapt, of course, because most of our audience, it would appear, can't shell out 60 pence to watch us on Patreon earlier in the week and in full. But our video has gone very well, and there's loads of comments, which leads me to the new Forbes list. Do you know that a 7-year-old child in the United States, Filipino children, who look just like my children actually, hint to the wife, get them at the coal face on YouTube, and earning, this 7-year-old earned $22 million last year. The 7-year-old YouTuber, he has 26 billion views.
For what?
What he does is, they film him opening his new toys, and the delight, or otherwise disappointment in some cases, and how he builds the toy and plays with it, that's all. 26 billion views. And of course, as soon as the number started to climb, the toy manufacturers started sending the toys, so he always had plenty to unwrap and play with. And then, inevitably, the toy manufacturers began paying the boy to unwrap their toy rather than that
disgust
toy.
on my face.
And then Walmart gave him a range of his own. His name's Ryan. His own toys, his own products. And now his parents have got their feet up, and the boy, the 7-year-old boy, he's not up a chimney in the way 7-year-old boys used to be. He's unwrapping toys
Shackled to his YouTube
coining in tens of millions of dollars a year. And the parents don't have to work again. Mrs., get the children at work on YouTube right now.
And if you, like me, think this is the most disgusting capitalist story you've ever heard, then get involved. You can tweet me at Mr Topple or at George Galloway, and don't forget to use the hashtag Topple Galloway. So until next week, if you wish to get your children on the YouTube, follow George's...
Send your children to work day.
Oh my God. That's awful.